Rudy Husny, former advisor to the Harper government, political analyst, and talk about, a couple of things. Number one, and I know, Rudy, you want to talk about the Mark Carney French interview that he gave on Radcan. And I want to mention again, let's bring up the Angus Reid poll today. So let's start with what you heard in that French interview.
Yes, it was very interesting. So Monday, it was broadcast, the second French interview of Mark Carney. Remember that he only gave one to TVA and now to Radio-Canada. It was interesting because he did mention a little bit about pipelines, and he didn't exactly say the same thing in English and in French. In English, he said, for example, that he would use, for example, the power of the federal government for those big and national projects. But when he was specifically asked in French, he said that he would obviously consult with Quebec and he would not impose something on Quebec. So not exactly the same language. And also, there's it's a little bit hard to follow him a little bit on the economy because he does say that he wants to balance the budget in 3 years. It's the Conservative are saying 5 years. He's more ambitious than the Conservative, but he has kind of a strange definition of expenses and investment. He says he wants to make sure that he takes out investment in when he's going to make his calculation about the deficit. So we'll see, but it was a good interview. I can say that his French has improved since his last interview a week ago. So you can see that he's working very hard, and that there's going to be a debate February 24th and 25th, especially one in French. So you can see that he's talking and speaking a lot in French recently to make sure that his level is at he has a good level for that debate, because that's a main point for him, to make sure that he can show that he has a good level of French compared to the others. And I can say, and I know you want to talk about the polls, I can say that his strategy is working because the poll from today showed that he was able to gain more than 10 points since the last poll, and there's only now a difference of 5 points between the Conservative at 40%, who dropped 5 points to 40%, and now to the Liberals with Mark Carney, who are around 35 to 37%.
So let me ask you, okay, before I come back to the polling, in describing Mark Carney, and this different in English, different in French, which is something that's, talked about often, right? When candidates come here, although you think they learn from that lesson of not saying English, one thing in English and another in French, because all people have to do is point out, here, you said this in English and you said this in French. How do you square that circle? But the idea of the pipeline, Rudy, is interesting because even Premier Legault now, and it's been this way for a couple of weeks, I guess, since the Trump tariff threat, is beginning to talk more and more about the potential social acceptability for that pipeline in Quebec. So is Mark Carney wrong to say what he said?
No, I don't think he's wrong, but it's just a question of, is he able to have make the same argument in French and in English, saying that he is pro-pipeline? It's always a little bit tricky. It's true that they've been saying for a long time that there's no acceptability for a pipeline in Quebec, but when you look at the polls, as you rightly said, it's not true. So we'll see. Is that something that he wants to talk on the offensive? I don't think so. And there was also, he made a little correction, because I know that in the past he said that he would possibly balance the budget by cutting transfers. And when you hear the more cutting transfer, you can think about healthcare. Right. And that's a very important issue for provinces, which he didn't use that time. He said that he was not going to cut transfers, and again saying that he's going to reduce expenses but not investment. So it's the difficulty. Is this because his French interview, his level of French wasn't at the level that he wanted, or he didn't use the right sentences? So that's why you have to kind of look and say, okay, now it's his second interview. We'll see when he's going to make the third one, which will be obviously the debate. What kind of language would he use in French and in English in terms of transfer to provinces, balancing the budget, and obviously an energy corridor in Quebec or not?
I didn't see the interview. Was he asked about the French language in Quebec, whether he considers it to be in decline or anything? No?
No. He wasn't asked about that.
Interesting. Okay. Let me move on then and go back to the poll where we started. So Angus Reid poll, if you factor in the margin of error, 3%, we basically have a dead heat with Mark Carney as the leader. So I guess the question becomes, from someone who's worked on the conservative side here, Rudy, what do you do if you're Pierre Poilievre to change the message? Because it doesn't seem the old message is getting through anymore.
I mean, I don't think he should abandon everything because, look, I think that affordability is still an issue, housing crisis is still an issue, immigration is still an issue. But obviously, the narrative changed with who's going to be who has the more leadership when it comes to dealing with Donald Trump, with the U.S. tariffs, who has more experience. And also, there's a strategy of Mark Carney, which I think is working well. He's able to kind of position himself, and he said it in that interview in French, that he's more at the center of the spectrum when it comes to the economy. So he wants to make a separation between what he wants to do on the economy and Justin Trudeau. He even say that he's more on the center right of the spectrum. So the goal for him is to attract the blue liberals, because you can see that there was a lot of people who are not happy with the track record of Justin Trudeau when it comes to the economy. Obviously, the massive deficits, and maybe some people went to the Conservative Party or parked their vote with the Conservative Party and now are reconsidering with Mark Carney and going back to the Liberals. So I do believe that it's a good strategy, but it's an interesting thing is that, yes, the Conservative and the Liberals are now closer, but the NDP is at only 10%, which means that they dropped also 10 points, meaning that even people who supported the NDP, who are more on the left on the spectrum, are willing to go and support the Liberals, even if Mark Carney is saying that he's more center-right. So it's a very interesting dynamic that is happening. It's not a good news, obviously, for the Conservatives, because, yes, they dropped 5 points, but it's also not very good news for the NDP, who basically is at 10%, which is really at the bottom of what we've seen in the past. So I think that there's an effect, I would say, that, Mark Carney is new. People are paying attention to him. They like his resume. For the moment, he hasn't done anything bad. So we'll see what happens during the debate. And also, there's some very, very encouraging fundraiser numbers that were just released today. He was able to raise more than $1.9 million compared to $600,000 to Chrystia Freeland. So you can see that now he is the front runner when it comes to obviously the polls, but also when it comes to fundraising. So I think that the race is basically done and that Mark Carney is going to win this race, especially that Pierre Poilievre had a rally Saturday in Ottawa, and he didn't mention once the name Chrystia Freeland. So he was really targeting Mark Carney. So that's also something that is very interesting. So the Conservatives are trying to attack only Mark Carney and not paying any attention whatsoever to Chrystia Freeland.
I would just ask one thing really quickly, and that is what you think, given the terrible numbers for the NDP, is this the end of Jagmeet Singh, do you think, as their leader?
Oh, yes. Look, it's been 2 elections that he's only losing seats. So I think that's really the end for him. It's his last election, and anyway, there'll be a confidence vote after this election. So I think that it's his last election campaign because, yes, you can see it in the polls. He tried everything. He tried to kind of make this alliance with the NDP, with the Liberals. He tried to pass some programs, but you can see now in the polls that he's not getting any credit whatsoever for what he did with the Liberals. So, and one thing that I wanted to mention just to finish, one interesting thing that Mark Carney said in his interview in French in Radio-Canada, that if he becomes leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister, he's looking to have an election rather quickly, because he did say that he needs a strong mandate to go after Donald Trump and the U.S. So that means that possibly will be an election in April.
So that won't be a surprise. As soon as he wins the race, you imagine he will call an election.
Yes, there's no point for him. I mean, he cannot go back to the House of Commons and to Parliament, because obviously he doesn't have a seat.
Right.
So there will be an empty chair in Parliament when there's the seat of the Prime Minister, and the Parliament is only supposed to be recalled at the end of March. So maybe he will try to take advantage of this honeymoon, of the good polls and of the momentum, and have an election. We'll see what happens with Doug Ford in Ontario, but that's exactly the calculus that Doug Ford did by calling an election, saying he needs a strong mandate to fight the tariff and the U.S. administration.
Rudy, we leave it at that. I thank you so much. Appreciate it.